My husband's shocking political views nearly destroyed our marriage. Emotional breakdown. I've been wrestling with a growing dread, a cold certainty that has shaken the very foundation of my marriage. The realization has hit me like a physical blow. I've lost all respect for my husband's unwavering political stance. It's not just a difference of opinion, it feels like a chasm opening up between us, threatening to swallow everything we've built together. How could I, in good conscience, stand by and watch him support ideologies that I now believe are actively harmful to our daughter, to women, to everyone? My husband and I were having yet another discussion, a euphemism for increasingly fraught arguments about politics. He votes Republican, a fact I used to dismiss with an easygoing, agree to disagree shrug. But lately, my perspective has undergone a radical shift. I've shed my youthful indifference and embraced a fierce, unwavering commitment to principles I can no longer compromise on. I love him, truly. I know he loves me. But lately, I found myself viewing his political opinions as naive, detached, even bordering on dangerous. He's a good man, I tell myself. He's even changed his mind on things in the past when confronted with compelling evidence. But this feels different. Let me give you some context. My cousin, a vibrant, loving woman, nearly died a few years ago while living in a state with draconian anti-abortion laws. The doctors, bound by restrictive regulations, hesitated, delayed, and waited until her dead fetus had been inside her for weeks, poisoning her system. It was a harrowing experience, one that ripped away any lingering apathy I might have held. My principles, once softly defined, have been forged in that fire, sharpened to a gleaming edge. Then came last night. We were talking about abortion rights as healthcare, as a fundamental right. I lost it. Sheer, unadulterated terror gripped me. The image of my cousin flashed before my eyes, morphing into our own sweet daughter facing a similar nightmare. How could he, my husband, not see the inherent danger? How could he blindly support a party whose policies actively threaten her well-being? In that moment, I felt like he was betraying our family, prioritizing abstract economic theories over the very real, life-and-death consequences of his choices. He was okay making economics work for our family at the expense of my bodily autonomy and reproductive health care. The dam broke. In a raw, tearful outburst, I confessed that the thought of him supporting these policies was so abhorrent, so deeply unsettling, that I feared I would leave him. The words tumbled out, fueled by a mixture of fear, anger, and a profound sense of betrayal. The terror that I could literally get shot to death in school like so many other parents and children, that I would let my own mother rot in a nursing home. She votes are his only concern. He looked genuinely hurt, bewildered. Would you actually abandon me like that? He asked, his voice laced with disbelief. I, ever the blunt truth teller, admitted that I might. That in a moment of irrational grief and betrayal, I could see myself walking away. I knew, deep down, that my concerns were not being taken seriously, that common sense had been abandoned. It felt like watching a car crash about to take our daughter in mortal danger and seeing him just watching it happen because it doesn't involve his own body. I know he needed to hear the truth, but I delivered it with the force of a sledgehammer. I apologized this morning for the way I said it, for the potential devastation those words could cause. I promised we would talk later, when I could articulate my feelings more calmly, but I'm at a complete loss. How do I convey the deadly seriousness of this situation without triggering a nuclear meltdown? How do I make him understand that this isn't just another sensitive topic, but a fundamental threat to our daughter's safety and my own sense of security? I'm not asking for permission to leave him, don't get me wrong. The most frustrating part is that I'm the one changing, shifting the dynamic of our relationship. I'm only beginning to understand how politics are relevant to our family's well-being, not some distant abstraction to be debated over dinner. Relevant comment 1. Ask him to name scenarios he would accept that caused the premature death of his daughter. Ask him to name what life-saving healthcare he would be willing to deny for his daughter based on principles. If he can't name them, ask him why is abortion different. Use your cousin's story as a hypothetical for your daughter, but be as graphic with it as you can be. But in all honesty, if you must labor so much to convince him to care about your and your daughter's health and well-being, then this should also serve as a wake-up call to you. And if I were you, you meant what you said and only apologized. I say let him be uncomfortable. Why are you so concerned with the bluntness of your words and not concerned about how quick he is to dismiss you? Relevant comment 2. I'm the daughter of a Republican dad and a liberal mom. I'm honestly not sure why they are still together. Luckily, I live in a liberal state that doesn't take away human rights, so I think it allows my mom not to think about it as much. It's been since Trump that I've really seen the division between them. I don't really have any advice to give you, but that's the perspective from a daughter in a similar type of situation. I love my dad, but I don't have a lot of respect for him because I don't think he actually understands what's going on. It hurts as a daughter to know my dad votes for a party that does harm, mainly because he believes in the economics of Republicans. I also hate having to be around my parents in the evenings, especially if they are watching the news. My mom definitely holds frustration for my dad and takes it out by saying mean things to him. And I feel like my dad doesn't take it seriously because I don't think he actually understands how scary this all is for certain people. I wish my parents would do therapy together, and honestly, You guys should probably do therapy together if you actually want to make your marriage work without resentment growing. Relevant comment 3. The worst part is all these men talk about the economics of being a Republican when all the data shows time and time again that those economics are absolutely horrible for 99.9% of us. They literally will cause harm to their families and others because they believe lies and don't want to hear otherwise. Relevant comment 4. I understand why you don't want advice to leave him, but you may have to accept that as your reality simply because your morals and ethics are no longer compatible. But of course, do everything you can to try to reach him. Obviously, deep down you know him and know he has the potential. I went through this with my own husband years ago, and I wasn't nice about it. It was pretty much a deal breaker for me then, and now he knows he has no wiggle room, and he was too busy being smugly libertarian on every other issue, so I had nothing to lose. Once he extracted his head from his butt, I've been happy to explain things from a women's perspective as long as he's willing to actually listen. He's not perfect, but he gets a lot that men generally don't or take for granted. I do know that one of my big points was that his views meant I couldn't trust him. Women's reproductive rights sure don't affect men directly, but by not caring about the issue because they care about the women in their life, they are sending a clear message that women are interchangeable appliances. He either cares about the things that are important to you, or he doesn't actually care about you. He can't claim to love and respect you and want a future with you if he's voting against your basic interest. That is hurtful for you, but you are allowing him to center his feelings hurt because you threatened to divorce him someday. He's hurting you now, but he wants to focus on his potential future pain that would be a direct consequence of his behavior now. Let that sink in. He is telling you exactly where you stand with him in multiple ways. Further, he's deluded if he thinks voting for Trump Republicans is going to actually be good for his finances. Maybe in the short term, he will get some tax cuts, but the reality is that any gains he might make will be offset by the tax overhaul and tariffs. If your wealth is dependent on your income in any significant way, Trump winning would put your income at risk as women are forced out of the workforce. If your income depends on either of you working overtime, a lot of tax deductions and credits that primarily benefit low and middle-class families are being eliminated. After strengthened unions, we've already had a preview of his rotted-out trickle-down economy from his first term. Your husband is being incredibly short-sighted. Relevant comment 5. I'm not sure what you are trying to achieve with this. You say you don't need people telling you to leave him, however the harsh reality is, in this situation, that is your present and your future. As long as you stick with Republican, he is not a very good man when he put your daughter's and every other woman's life at risk by voting for people who want nothing but destruction. That doesn't change, no matter how much you gaslight yourself that you can somehow fix it. Sorry to be so blunt about it. Relevant comment 6. This is it. If a man is a Republican, if he plans on voting for the GOP, even if Trump kicks over tomorrow and is replaced by someone who's less openly insane, if he is willfully ignorant, he is not a good man. Full stop. He can help old ladies cross the street and volunteer at a soup kitchen as a hobby, but he's still not a good man because he does not actually value human rights. You think you can fix your partner? You can't. Nobody can fix another person. You can't be the person who is changing the dynamic of the relationship when you're not the bad actor. You should not have to explain why rolling back women's rights is up to get someone to see that. Update. We had a serious discussion. I went into more detail about my concerns and fears, and it was intense. I was much better at presenting the case this time, far less emotional. I gave him several hypotheticals that involved a particularly gruesome set of circumstances involving his balls. I won't bore you with the nitty-gritty, but the gist was to make him understand the sheer, terrifying risk involved in a pregnancy gone wrong. I told him to seriously consider carrying a tiny fetus in his balls and the likelihood of getting an infection, sepsis, etc., and the myriad of ways he could end up dead, permanently physically injured, disfigured, or unable to produce a fetus in the future if he didn't have the option of removing the fetus from his balls. I asked him if he would even want to take that risk, and he agreed that he'd be very likely to remove it unless he was ready for those outcomes. I asked him why in the world would I be justified in telling him he has to carry it no matter what, and it might only be removed after his balls, sac, or his organs start shutting down. Once he seemed to start grasping the enormity of what abortion and complications entail and seeing why it's very important to not let unknown people control what options you have, with no medical reason. And then I can tell he avoided thinking about it because he knows, in some way, that it says something about his character. And I resented having to even give him a hypothetical in the first place. Why do I have to resort to these graphic scenarios for him to actively be using his empathy skills every day? I explained how I have demonstrated the capacity to care about and evaluate gender issues he's brought to my attention in the past. That was a difficult part of the conversation. I also told him that I do not trust him to always make good decisions for us. He listened and let me talk. He asked if I was going to leave him, and he was clearly nervous. I told him I'm not taking drastic steps, like immediately filing for divorce. But I certainly will when it comes to keeping our daughter healthy and safe. I also started to say that if we ever found ourselves in a situation where our daughter needed an abortion or medical care, and he interrupted me to say you wouldn't have to lie. because I'll be driving the car or buying the plane tickets and we will all go anywhere we need to. I burst into tears. We ended the conversation, and he said I laid a lot on him and he needed a break but said he had things to think about. I didn't push any more politics, but I feel like my trust has been slightly restored. I'm not getting my hopes up, but I think he realizes that he's wading in dark and dangerous waters when it comes to our futures. Relevant comment 7. All of this reminds me so much of that scene in the show The Handmaid's Tale where June needs to get birth control pills, and her husband has to sign something for her to get them. And her husband dismisses her concerns. That's okay. I'll take care of you. No big deal. It's fine. It's easy to dismiss a concern when that concern doesn't seem to affect you directly. And the problem is that no matter what we say, no matter what example we give, some people will always have a degree of removal from an issue that can affect their understanding and their empathy. My own husband is empathetic, but he doesn't understand why someone staring down the barrel of men's potential for harming women, is so angry about abortion. He doesn't understand why a woman in a loving marriage that doesn't look likely to end anytime soon, am upset about the end of no-fault divorce, or why I, as someone with no connection to prison, am upset about our horribly inequitable carceral system. And he will say he understands my objections, but then he's like, why bother wasting energy getting upset? I don't know how to get across to him that just because it doesn't apply to me or us right now doesn't mean it won't later. I also don't know how to get across to him that it's very difficult to see attacks on our ability to get a divorce. If someone punches someone else like me in the face, that's very upsetting. But they aren't looking him in the eye, so he doesn't see it that way. Relevant comment 8. I admire the heck out of you for having this huge conversation with your husband. Thank you for making the case for all of us, and thanks for sharing with us. I hope your example can help others who need to have serious discussions like this with people in their lives. Relevant comment 9. I'm glad you had this talk and that he is starting to reconsider his decisions. But I hope you are very clear with him that this isn't about him setting aside his views for the special case of you and his daughter. Other women are entitled to the same respect and autonomy that he wants for his daughter. If his position is that he will pack the bags and buy the plane tickets for your daughter, then he's not a good man. We talked about the women getting turned away from emergency rooms across the country because they were having pregnancy complications for babies that they likely wanted to keep. And it was like I could see a gear start cranking in his head, like he never considered that a lot of women who seek emergency abortions actually wanted their babies. Relevant comment 10. My husband and I had this discussion before our first kid. This was before Roe v. Wade was overturned, but the writing was on the wall that it might be. We live in a very high cost of living city for my job, but things weren't going well financially. I told him that as long as kids were on the table, moving to a red state was out of the question. I refused to move to a place where I would not be able to get access to care that I needed and end up dead just because we were trying to have a kid. My husband brushed it off. One of his close family members is one of the most prominent objins in the country. He said that when the worst came to worst, she would help us. But I said, how exactly, what exactly will she do? And he stopped in his tracks. That ended of the discussion right there. My husband had simply never had to consider it before. At the time, we weren't seriously thinking about kids, so he hadn't really thought it through. A few months later, Roe v. Wade was overturned, and I ended up pregnant with our first kid. I'm currently pregnant with our second. We still have regular discussions about potentially moving. Never once subsequently has he ever considered a red state. Relevant comment 11. So glad he finally understood the reason why we need to vote the way we do to protect our women. But is he going to back up what he says he now understands by voting the opposite way from what he's done before? Relevant comment 12. I hate that many men only recognize women's bodily autonomy when they become fathers. I hope you really talked to him about not voting Republican this year, otherwise this whole thing is really moot. Relevant comment 13. I'm glad he understood, but he still votes Republican. The Democratic Party is still right-wing. No, they are not leftist unless you're talking about the progressives. But your husband deliberately chose to vote for the more racist, ableist, and bigger than every way party. The only reason you had this discussion is because it affects you and your daughter on the basis of gender and sex. I'm not going to tell you to get a divorce, but you should probably take a good look at your own morals and principles if you still think it's okay for him to vote the way he does, especially given everything that has happened since 2016. Editor's note. Op seems satisfied with her discussion with her husband, whether you disagree or not, so it's unlikely to update. Therefore, I have marked this as conclusion. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. Now, after hearing my story, the emotional roller coaster of trying to bridge this political divide with my husband, I'm left wondering, did I handle this situation the right way? Was I too harsh, too uncompromising? Should I have softened my approach, or was the blunt honesty necessary to finally break through his detachment? I desperately need your perspective on this. What are your thoughts? I am looking forward to hearing your feedback and suggestions on how I navigated this crisis in my marriage and if my methods were in line with what you believe is acceptable in a relationship.